Welcome back, everyone. So we've just talked about common mental health experiences for leaders, and now we're going to talk about help seeking, when to seek professional help and how to go about it, and what that experience and process is going to be like. So Stephen, as a first question, church leaders often, have good mental health support around them through mentors or strong community or healthy habits. When is that maybe not quite enough and it's time to consider seeking professional help in addition to those things?
Yeah, I think probably a good starting place is when, and it's always strange to say it this way maybe, but when we start to experience ourselves differently. Like we know ourselves probably better than anybody else. And so but also saying, like sometimes there are people around us that might say like, hey, you're kind of being more I've noticed more anger. I've noticed you're being a bit more irritable. And it's not always easy to receive some of those things, especially if we're not sure what to make of that. It can bring out a bit of a defensiveness, but that is actually one way that can be really helpful if it's people that we really trust. But yeah, going back, I think it is ultimately we know ourselves pretty well. And if we're starting to notice some of those things coming up, irritability, less not caring about things as much, irritability toward others, like maybe, again, like the idea of empathy, like not feeling as much love or care toward the people that normally we would find it easy to care and love for. That can be a sign as well. Also just tuning into like our bodies, and if we're not, if we're just feeling less energy, if we're not sleeping well, if our thought patterns might be changing, there might be some pessimism or some negativity that's there in different ways. I think those are all some signs that, if those go on unchecked for quite a while, that can lead to some other challenges. So it's important to maybe tune into that. Beyond that, I think if there are more clinically significant things, such as, if there is suicidal ideation, like thoughts of that, even that word suicidal ideation is such a kind of a mouthful. I think of it as there's a spectrum. There's probably times that most people are just kind of worn out and like, it would be nice if, I could just have a break, like maybe not be here anymore. And then, a lot in between there to maybe the other end of that spectrum of like, I really seriously am not doing well and I actually think I want to end my life. Like that's a totally different type of thing. And I think all of those are kind of alarming and jarring in different ways, but I think it's important to kind of just tune in and make sense of what that means. And sometimes it's the idea of like honoring our emotions, which kind of means like, hey, what are my emotions trying to tell me? Like if we view them as having good intentions rather than misleading us and being an inconvenience and a sign of weakness, but like, hey, this sadness I'm feeling, what's going on? Like, why am I not feeling this? And that's not always easy to answer alone. Like sometimes we actually do need to maybe speak with someone else to make sense of those emotions and to kind of look at some patterns and where they might be coming from.
Absolutely, so, yeah. Yeah, and you touched there on both kind of extreme experiences of it's really a good time, like you said, if you're experiencing suicidal thoughts or something, that's a really good time to seek professional help, maybe more urgently than, if you're just sleep's a little disrupted and you're kind of low mood or something, but both are relevant. In those kind of instances where it's more just like, your sleep's not quite where it could be, your mood isn't quite where it could be and such, is it still worth seeking professional care as a sort of preventative measure, addressing those things early before they might turn into something?
Yeah, I think awareness is really important, and I think I don't think there's many people that don't benefit. Like therapy is not for everybody. There's just some people that will never go. But I think that, I think for those that do, I think that my experience, I mean, it's easy for me to say is I got a horse in that race, but as 20 years as a therapist, I think when people sit down with me and they start to kind of unpack, often there is that sense of shame at first, that sense of like, I don't know how I ended up here. I don't know if I need to be here. I don't even know if this is actually serious enough. Like what I'm going through doesn't feel as bad as what this person's going through. There's a lot of those types of thinking. And I think it's like an invalidation. It's this uncertainty. It's this sense of not wanting to be seen as kind of hitting the alarm too quickly. Like we don't want to be alarmist about things. We always want to be like tempered and prudent. And so I think, just some basic understanding of telling our story and just having somebody listen to the things that we've been experiencing. And often people are carrying a lot more and they've experienced a lot more than they recognize. Because when we're living, it's just coming fast and furious, and then it kind of goes into the historical Rolodex, and we're on to the next thing, and we don't really think like, oh, in a 6-month period, I've done 5 funerals, and I've had, you know, this significant death in my life personally, and I've had this conflict with someone else, and I've had, and I've also been expected to perform, you know, all the same stuff as I usually do. Like that's a lot, to be able to kind of juggle all those different roles and all those different things that we're doing. So yeah, I think therapy can help to kind of make sense of that, and it doesn't need to just be therapy again, but you know, for a lot of people, it's maybe a spiritual director. Sometimes it is speaking with your doctor and just saying like, you know, is this like, does this seem clinically significant? Some doctors will do some basic like mental health screeners, and if there is something significant, they might recommend medication, they might recommend a therapist, they might even say like, maybe we should do a psych referral to a psychiatrist to see if there's something more significant going on here. So yeah, there's lots of different entry points, but yeah, I think if somebody feels like there's something going on, it might be, you know, good to tune into that sooner than later if possible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you alluded to it a little bit, but what are some of the reasons that someone might avoid seeking help if they recognize that this is a situation that counseling would benefit from, but they still don't want to take that step of starting counseling? What are some of the reasons that someone might avoid help seeking, and are those sometimes barriers that people can address in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big barrier, I mean, this word's a big word, but shame. I think that sense of somehow being weak, somehow failing. Sometimes there's even a moral piece to that, like maybe we're not, like our, you know, relationship with God's not right or something. Like some people, sometimes we'll talk like that, or we'll feel like we're being convicted of something if we feel like we're not living, you know, necessarily according to like the values that we've been trying to live to. So like life's messy, it's complicated, there's a lot of moving parts. But shame, sometimes there's this idea of Nathanson's compass of shame. Anybody can Google that. But it's when we feel shame, we often will isolate from others is kind of the classic shame response. Sometimes we isolate from ourselves. We kind of numb out. That can be through substance use, that can be through pornography, that can be through food, that can be through like some things that are also maybe on the outside healthy activities. We can work a lot, we can exercise a lot, we can, you know, whatever those things are. But those things sometimes they might look good, but they're also maybe a distraction from like tuning into like our own feelings and making sense of it. So that's two parts of that shame, is isolating from others or ourselves. The other part of that is sometimes we can attack others. And that's not one that comes up as much, but sometimes we do. Even if we're not outwardly attacking people, we can be very angry at people. We can feel like they're constantly making demands of us and they're not understanding our own perspective, that it's just unreasonable, and we can feel bullied, we can feel pushed around by people, and sometimes that comes out. Like in a really extreme case, I have seen people that come in after there was like an outburst, like where there was, you know, actually an incident where there was anger or something expressed, but more often that's internalized. The other piece of that is we attack ourselves, and we just feel like, you know, if everything else, there's nothing else obvious here, I must just really be failing here. I must be, something is wrong. This might be getting into that burnout territory where I just do not have anything left in the tank. I'm trying so hard to make this work. I'm doing all these things, and yet I don't feel appreciated, and I feel like ultimately I must just not be doing this well. I might do just something, I'm in the wrong career, or somehow I can't do this anymore. So I think that's often that piece that prevents people from kind of asking for help. Yeah.
And is there a way that people can overcome that shame?
I mean, to me, the biggest antidote to shame is community. So if there's somebody that we can talk to, somebody in that inner circle that we trust, and that's vulnerability. Like that's, to me, vulnerability is, I know it's kind of a buzzword, but it's really key. Like we need to be able to actually be ourselves with somebody and share kind of what our experiences are and what we're experiencing, feeling, thinking. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter who that is necessarily. I always say in a perfect world, we might not need therapists, but we need to find somebody that we can, and that's probably not going to be somebody that's tied to, you know, your paycheck. It's probably going to be somebody that's from a different place. It might be somebody in your family, but sometimes that might be too close. There might be some reasons why that's not always safe to be vulnerable to, because that can hurt other people that we're close to. If we kind of say like, hey, you know, this load that I'm used to carrying and that I can do so well, I'm actually not feeling like I can keep doing that right now. And that's terrifying to me. I don't know what to do because of that. So yeah, that's where you have to find someone, whether that's a spiritual director or a therapist, or, sometimes there's different, mentor groups, or just professional groups where you're meeting with other pastors or other people where you can talk about those things and normalize those things and take away the stigma.
Yeah, and that's like simple but so powerful, that idea that vulnerability is an antidote to shame. Yeah,
absolutely.
And as we're thinking about approaching therapy, counseling, professional mental health support, there's a lot of options out there. And I know this is something that I think is often a bit of a stumbling block for people, is trying to disentangle what's a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and who should I try and see, Can you speak a little bit to the difference of those service providers and how people can figure out who's best for them to approach?
Yeah, for sure. It's a complicated system, and I think it's one that there's challenges and barriers that make it difficult for a lot of people to access those things, even if it's just cost alone, but time is another one. I think also people sometimes, it feels scary to reach out if it ends up not being somebody that we quite feel like it fits with us, and you meet with a therapist 1 or 2 times, and then it feels like, I'm not sure that this is going to work, and then you feel like you're starting from scratch. So there's lots of different things that I think that can be barriers for people. So I think we're getting better at that slowly, but yeah, typically psychiatrists would be accessed through, most of the time, through your family doctor, through a referral that way, and that's usually once it's been deemed that maybe there's more significant clinical, like mental health issues at play. Before that, then there's psychologists and counseling therapists or psychotherapists, and those generally you can find those privately. Like you can access those online. You can find someone that you can read their bios and find somebody that's a good fit. I work for Chalet Mental Health Network, and so through our agency, we partner with. So we basically have, it's like an employee assistance program, but it's called the Counseling Assistance Program. And we partner with faith, like a lot of faith agencies or nonprofits through schools. And then largely churches would be our main kind of group that we're working with, where we seek to provide affordable professional Christian therapy to people that are part of those organizations. So there's kind of like a annual kind of fee, and it depends on the organization. There's a lot of moving parts to that, but basically anybody that's part of that then can access a certain number of sessions that are covered because of that plan. So that's one way that people can access good quality mental health care, even if it's like that early intervention stage, and if there's more needed, I think therapists are usually pretty good at kind of helping people navigate that system as well.
And that's a great point too, that you might start with someone like a therapist who might say like, hey, it might be good if you speak to this person, right? Like that people within the system who know it well might be able to help refer you to and find just the right sweet spot for you.
Yeah, and all the therapists that would work through that type of program would be part of whatever college they're in. Like, it depends on the province or the geographical area that the person would be working in.
Right. And that's an important note too, that it's something that might vary by province as well. If someone in Ontario is watching this or something, it might be slightly different.
Yeah, every jurisdiction has a little bit of a different way that things are set up, but generally it's it works more or less the same way. So,
And what are the steps to accessing care? Like if I decide today that I want to start seeing a therapist, practically, how am I going to get that first appointment?
Yeah, for sure. And are you asking specifically through Chalet Network or through in general?
Yeah, like both is
for both. I mean, generally, not that I'm plugging for Psychology Today, but Psychology Today would be a place that most people now are aware of, that where you can go and you can search for therapists in your area. There's a lot of people that now do therapy online, so that's kind of the brave new world of that. That wasn't like, I had never done an online session with clients pre-COVID, but then since then, probably 80% of my work is now online. Wow. So that's a nice way to do it. As far as through Shalem, if somebody was wanting to access or if their church was maybe a member of, or not a member, but if they're part of that program, then that's they can either talk to their church, but you can go to Shalem Network, SHALEM, because it's a weird word. It means like it's a sense of wholeness and safety, is Shalem. But shalemnetwork.org is our website, so people
Wonderful.
can look at that as well as a way to access. Christian therapists. And when I say Christian therapist, that's also like something that I'm always like...
A broad term too.
Yeah, it's a broad term. It's just professionals that happen to be Christians that understand that culture, that grew up in, faith-based world. And so there's an understanding of kind of the nuances of some of that, which I think for a lot of people is what they're looking for. Because, I think people want... it's help. You need to find a therapist. It's a service you're paying for. You want to find a therapist that feels like it's a good fit for you, not someone that's just going to like tell you what you need to hear always, but someone that's going to challenge you, but someone who's also going to be able to understand some of that experience. Yeah. And so that's part of the value that I think comes from that program.
Yeah, has the background and context to challenge you effectively because they have that context. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And if, I'm going into my first counseling appointment ever, what can I expect as part of that first session?
Yeah. I mean, most people probably have some idea now, even just because there's a lot of TV shows that have therapy as part of it, but you don't usually see like the confidentiality part. So, there would be things like there's strict confidentiality, even if it's through Shalem and the counseling assistance program. None of that would get shared with the church or with whatever agency that person's a part of. But confidentiality is key. The ideas of consent. So what are the things that stay between the therapist and the client? And most everything does. It's only if there's maybe some safety issues and things like that there'd be some. I'm not going to get into that, but that's some of the things that would come up. And it's really important though, is building rapport with clients, that people have a good understanding of what that means, because we talked about shame. Shame is sometimes we need to do that lay that groundwork of building that relationship, so that that antidote for shame is there, that trust is there, and that we can openly talk about those things that we need to address. After that initial part is established, though, really for me, like, it's just mapping out and listening to what the client is experiencing in their life. What are the different areas I often think of it as pressure points. What are those kind of those things that bind us, and can we start to maybe snip some of those cords and make sense of that? And the therapy room is often like a kind of an extension of that person's brain, but you kind of get to visit. You have the privilege as the therapist to visit with them and to kind of notice and observe and reflect and reframe and do some of those beautiful things that help people to kind of have some self-compassion, that are able to see their stories in different ways. And learn, again, to experience themselves in some new ways as well. I tend to work from 4 main kind of models. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of the one that everybody knows about.
Classic.
But being aware of unhelpful thinking patterns and being able to challenge those and maybe establish some new thinking patterns. Dialectical behavior therapy is often it's kind of a skills-based model where we're learning about coping. We're learning about how our thinking is impacting like our physical bodies. And just making sense of that. Narrative therapy is another one that I really work from a lot. I've talked a bit about that, but just people's stories and reframing and making sense of that. There's going to be parts where we felt like it was our fault, and when we look back, we're like, actually, that it looked like you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. That we look back on certain times of our life with the hindsight's 20/20, and then we're like, well, from this vantage point, why didn't I do that differently? But at the time, you didn't see it that way, and so, but that we hold ourselves on the hook for some of that stuff. So it can be really, there's a lot of release that can happen. And attachment theory, as well, as I work from that a lot, is I just think we're kind of created to be in relationship with other people, and when there's lots of different things that can disrupt, shame being one of them, but that can disrupt those relationships. And I think when we're feeling isolated, when we're feeling misunderstood, that has profound effects on the way that we see ourselves, and our mental health is impacted in the world. So,
absolutely.
That would be that's a big answer, but I think at the beginning of therapy, it's just starting to establish what are some of those pressure points, and what's going to be a model or some models that we can draw from that might help to bring some relief, and ultimately it's like improving quality of life too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very helpful introduction, this idea that you're showing up, there's maybe a bit of paperwork, there's maybe an introduction to what stays in the room and how confidentiality works, and then getting to know your therapist and kind of building some trust there and understanding what, you know, approaches are going to work best for you kind of going forward. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's fun.
Great.
That's good.
Well, in the next episode, we're going to move to something that's a bit more practical and activity based, that gives people tools that they can start practicing at home. So we'll move into that now. Thank you.